ladies, and panties are my treasure!
Log Horizon isn't as good as you remember. Now I know that Log Horizon is touted as one of the good stuck in an MMO isekai series, and I actually agree with that opinion. I've loved the series ever since 2017 when I binged both seasons while laid up with what I now know is appendicitis. In fact, Log Horizon and more embarrassingly SAO were the two major players in what became my adoration for the genre. I fell in love with these characters, so much so that I got a second cat just to name him Nyanta. The way they play off each other is fantastic and often reminiscent of what it's like to play games with friends. This series constantly flips genre conventions on their head in favor of more creative solutions, and the series' focus on intelligence over raw power has stuck with me to this day and even impacts my own writing. But during this most recent rewatch, I did my best to put all of that love and admiration aside and look at Log Horizon's first season with a pair of fresh, untinted glasses. And what I saw were several glaring issues within the third act especially that marred my opinion of the season. I just want to clarify that this video only covers Log Horizon's first season and is specifically being made to criticize the first season, as when people speak about Log Horizon, they really only ever talk about how bad the second season is or its flaws and kind of act like the first season is untouchable. And even though I love it, I feel like we do need to talk about it. Also, I'm planning on reviewing each season individually as well as the West Wind Brigade spin-off manga, so if you do like this video, make sure to click the like button, make sure to subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what isekai series got you into the genre. I feel like the choice to separate many of the major characters that acted as comedic relief for most of the season, specifically Naotsuku and Akatsuki, was a poor one. Without the dynamic, most of the comedic heavy lifting has to be done by Rudy. And don't get me wrong, I love Rudy. He's easily one of my favorite characters and I would do anything for that beautiful boy. But placing so much of a burden on a single character leaves this season's third act feeling gloomy. Once again, it's a minor gripe, so I just wanted to get it out of the way really quickly. Written by Mamare Tona, Log Horizon started as a series of web novels back in 2010 and has since released 11 light novel volumes, a 3-season anime, a single-issue manga, several spin-off manga series, only one of which has been translated, and a tactical role-playing game. The story is a long and winding one, following the exploits of a young graduate student named Kai Shiragane, as he and several 100,000 others are transported into the world of their favorite MMORPG, Elder Tales. Throughout the season, Kai aka Shiro uses his knowledge as an 8-year veteran of the game as well as the help of a plethora of supporting characters to not only piece together what's happened to them, but also how they're all meant to go about living in this new world. Right off the bat, one of the things I love about Log Horizon is that it approaches being transported into another world in somewhat of a realistic way. I understand the sentiment makes no sense, but just bear with me. From the very second that the season begins, the phenomena that has just brought these players into their favorite game is cast in a negative light. There may be moments of awe or joy, but these are quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of helplessness and depression. Many players sit down and do nothing, while others lash out at the NPCs demanding to speak to a GM. In my mind, this is how being isekai'd would truly go, because you're not just transported into another world, you're ripped from your own. Everything that you have ever known has just been taken from you, so it's understandable that you would be angry. Hell, it would be really weird if you weren't. But that sense of realism doesn't stop there. The entirety of Log Horizon's first act is spent on discerning and fulfilling the basic needs of the populace while planting seeds for things to come. The first of which is solving a pseudo-food crisis. While the food within the game world is abundant, it has no taste outside of a few base ingredients like fruits and spices, leaving one of the many pleasures of living completely devoid of meaning. The inclusion of such a minute issue as well as its resolution adds to the overall feeling of authenticity. As the season continues, the problems become more and more complicated, and watching as Shiro and company devise plan after obscure plan to combat these issues gives the story real stakes. But that's not all. Unlike most of its contemporaries, death in Log Horizon is not the end. When an adventurer, aka player, dies, their body and mind are reconstituted in a cathedral, with the only price being a minute amount of experience points, or at least that's what we're led to believe. But later it's revealed that when a player dies, they actually lose some of their memories. Now, I don't know know about you, but illnesses that deal with a person's ability to call up and store memories scare the ever-living shit out of me. The idea of being left a shell of the person that I once was is one of my greatest fears. Not only that, but it's also revealed that the memories that are lost are purely those that deal with the real world. So it's very likely that given enough time, none of these characters will even remember that they have a home to return to in the first place. To be honest, when I first watched the series and even in subsequent rewatches, I never really pieced that together. I don't know why. I may have just taken the memory loss at face value, but now understanding that there's a real possibility that they may never get home recontextualizes many of the events in season 2. But we'll save that for another video because it's time to talk about my major issues with this first season, starting with power levels. The term itself is pretty self-explanatory, but just in case you don't know, a power level is an easy way to gauge one character's strength against another. Someone with a power level of 10 has no chance against someone whose power level is 50, unless you're talking about shonen anime, and then all bets are off. In Isekai, power levels are often represented as ranks or levels, as is the case with Log Horizon. Now, I'm sure many of you can see where I'm going with this, so I'm just gonna stop beating around the bush and say it. When it comes to the battles taking place at the training camp, the return of the Goblin King arc makes no sense. Let me explain. After the Round Table is founded and Shiro, Krusty, and the others go to meet with the leaders of the League of Freedom Cities, it's revealed that a massive force of goblins is carving its way through the land and heading for Maihama. This is due to the coronation of a new Goblin King. During this arc, there are two fronts, Krusty and the force of several thousand adventurers, and the other being all those who attended the training camp. Just in case you don't remember, during the training camp arc, we watched as Minori's team improved their overall abilities as well as their teamwork. So having them fight against a large force of goblins to then demonstrate their improvement seems like a logical step in the author's part. But there are several instances within the Return of the Goblin King arc where the level 90 adventurers are literally just sitting around while their level 30 and below students do all the heavy lifting. This makes absolutely no sense as their goal is to protect the town of Choshi, and I don't really see how you're doing that when you're just sitting on your ass. Their justification at the time is that they have a duty to everyone to recover their magic points so that they can cast their own spells. But why the hell do you have to use spells in the first place? Just swing your fucking sword. You're not paralyzed, you're a level 90, and the highest level enemy on that beach is a level 46. You could kill them with an especially rank fart. And I'm sure there are people out there listening to this saying that maybe the only way they can attack is with skills and abilities, to which I say, that's just bull. There's several instances throughout the first season where we've seen damage done without the use of skills and abilities. Here, I'll even list a few for you. Sarah cuts the last thorn on Demikos. Michitaka breaks the table. Minori cuts a skeletal archer. Shiro catches a punch with a finger literally every time anyone's attacked within a city. Literally every time that Akatsuki knees Naotsuku, and the list goes on. If it's possible to destroy the environment around you as well as hurt others, it's not a big leap to say that you could kill an enemy without using a skill. So why the fuck are these level 90s just sitting on their asses doing nothing while literal children do the fighting for them? Well, it's the same reason that Wanda just chills with Vision for the entirety of the battle in Avengers Infinity War, and Doctor Strange is fucking waterbending for the entire fight in Endgame. It's because if Naotsuku and the other level 90 adventurers joined the fight, it would be over in the blink of an eye and everyone knows it. Any semblance of stakes that these fights may have had dissolve in an instant if Naotsuku steps in. This is where Log Horizon's refusal to dip a toe into the more power fantasy side of the isekai genre just becomes grating. More often than not, this series' subversion of popular isekai tropes is refreshing and celebrated. I for one love the fact that there's little to no fan service in this season, and that the only harem shown is the entirety of the West Wind Brigade, which even then is only played for comedic effect instead of a male power fantasy. And I can't stress this enough, I love that Log Horizon isn't about a single overpowered person constantly saving the day. Instead, each and every character is made powerful by their willingness to work with others and their understanding of the world they're living in. It's for these reasons that I think Log Horizon is the perfect entry point for anyone who wishes to delve into the isekai isekai genre. But for all that I love these subversions, I despise the inaction of these characters even more. Now, I don't know if these scenes play out like this in the light novels. It's possible that Naotsuku and the others had a good reason to sit on the sidelines, but in the anime, it just strikes me as laziness on everyone's part. Also, Rudy, a level 25 sorcerer, and Sarah, a level 30 druid, both kill upwards of 11 plus level 30 enemies with a single spell, so just imagine what a level 90 could do. Yeah, it's a provocative title, I really don't care. From the get-go, Log Horizon assumes that you know nothing about the MMO genre of games. At the beginning of many of its episodes, some time is set aside to teach the audience about specific gaming terms or systems, such as the banking system or non-player characters. While I'd assume that many of the people watching Log Horizon have played an MMO or two in their day, these moments are necessary as they keep the non-gaming audiences up to speed on the story as it advances. My issue is not with the inclusion of these few minutes at the beginning of episodes, or even with the few moments that are taken during some action sequences to explain cooldowns. My issue stems from its overuse, specifically when it comes to Shiro's plans. While I'd agree that at times his plans are incredibly complex and need some explanation, such was the case with the Crescent Burger and the Round Table Conference, others are hinted at so far in advance that by the time they actually come to fruition, they're the only logical answer, and the time taken to explain just feels wasted. More specifically, I'm talking about what happens in episode number 20. Now, I know I started off this video with a spoiler warning, but as this is the conclusion of one of my absolute favorite moments in the series, I'd like to give another chance for everyone who hasn't watched season 1 of Log Horizon to click off and come back later after watching. So now that I've done that, we have to talk about Rudy. Rundle House Code was shown as early as episode 1 and can be seen in the background of several scenes throughout the first season, but doesn't really become a major character until episode number 11 with the kicking off of the summer training arc, during which he joins Minori, Toya, Isuzu, and Sarah on their expeditions into the Rogranda forest dungeon. He fights alongside them and is often the source of tension as he believes adventurers are a great deal more special than they really are. As the team continues to struggle, Rudy begins to blame himself. He views himself as the weak link of the group, but puts on a brave face to cover it up. Outside of the dungeon, he continues training while the others rest in hopes of becoming stronger as to no longer hold back the others. It's not until Minori has everyone sit down and talk about their strengths, weaknesses, and strategies that they should be using that we're shown that it wasn't a problem with any individual member. Instead, their problem stemmed from their lack of experience in team fighting. Once the group starts working together, they begin to see immediate results. So they then take this aforementioned growth and use all that they've learned to push back the Sawagin. But in the middle of said fight, one of Sarah's early warning systems goes off and Minori's team leaves the beach, instead heading toward the bridge leaving to Choshi, because you know, that's kind of what they were there to protect in the first place, not the level 90s just sitting there. Once they arrive, they fight with no backup, I might add, against a force that they can't handle and are quickly overwhelmed. But in a moment of unadulterated heroism, Rudy tackles a direwolf, resorting in his successful leading away of several enemy units and eventually killing them with the last of his magic power. When the other members of his team finally catch up with him, he's laying on the ground unconscious and on the verge of death. This is when it's revealed that Rundle House Code, the abundantly vain sorcerer, is actually an NPC. In a last-ditch effort to save his life, Minori contacts Shiro, who rushes to them and attempts to save Rudy. Now, this is where my issue lies. Shiro ends up creating a new kind of magic, using his skills as a level 90 scribe and the highest tier ingredients possible to make a contract that in essence makes Rudy an adventurer. Okay, checks out. I have no problem with this. We've been shown over and over again that amazing things can be done in this world as long as you combine high skill levels with high level ingredients. But that's the problem. We've been shown over and over again that this kind of thing is possible. I don't need it explicitly stated to me. If anything, I think the explanation is just a bit distracting, not to mention it kind of cheapens the moment. Don't get me wrong, there are parts of this specific situation that I feel need explanations and that are actually helpful when given. For instance, I'm glad that Minori explains the mana channeling skill, that Shiro explains that the link between Rudy's body and mind is still severed, and what the revival incense does. But I didn't need it reiterated to me for the 1000th time that Shiro was creating a new kind of magic or why said magic would work. By this point, we've been shown several times why it would work. Shit, the sheer fact that Rudy is a person and not a few lines of code would tell you that the spell would work. But that doesn't stop Shiro from spending several minutes explaining how he got the idea. We get it. You're smart. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think there's a point where you no longer need to explain that your main character is the smartest guy in the room, and it's around the time that they take over a city with a fucking hamburger. But whatever, it's time for my final and weirdly biggest issue with this first season. It has two endings. So for me, the season truly ends with Rudy waking up at the cathedral, having just become an adventurer. It wraps up the Return of the Goblin King arc and is just interesting enough to make viewers tune in for another season. But in reality, there are still 5 more episodes in which Marielle convinces the Round Table to throw a festival in Akihabara. I like to think of this as season 1.5 because outside of a few throwaway lines about an expedition to kill the Goblin King, it has nothing to do with the story that the first season is trying to tell, and instead is really meant to set up the major antagonist for season 2. Now, my including this in a list of problems doesn't necessarily mean I don't like it. I love that the Scale Festival is somewhat of a return to form. It brings back the story's more goofy nature, which is nice after the doom and gloom of the last arc. I especially love episode number 22, in which Shiro, Akatsuki, and Minori all attend a cake eating contest only to be bombarded with upwards of 9 full-size cakes to eat, or episode number 23, where Naotsuku, under the guise of a food safety inspector, eats his way through all the food stands only to have his punch card taken by Akatsuki. It's these kind of small moments of levity that I wish were more abundant in the Return of the Goblin King arc. But sadly, outside of these few instances, most of this arc just feels so rushed. They spend so much time thwarting this weirdly elaborate plan to undermine both Princess Linesia and the Round Table that they don't even take the time to properly introduce the person behind it. They try to draw parallels between Nereha and Shiro, but fail to give her the screen time needed to allow anything to sink in. By the time the credits rolled on episode number 25, I was more confused than anything. Was she lying about why she wanted Shiro? What exactly were the results of Nereha buying the cathedral? Who the fuck disappeared? And seriously, what the fuck was up with that end credit scene? Overall, there are some great and hilarious moments within the Scale Festival, but ultimately it leaves me with more questions than anything. I almost wish it was normalized at the time to take an especially small arc and make it into a feature film, similar to the Mugen Train arc in Demon Slayer. It may not seem like a lot, but spending an extra 15 to 20 minutes fleshing out Nereha would really improve this arc in my opinion. And if anything else, it would just allow season 1 to have a conclusion that's satisfying and enjoyable. And with that, it brings an end to this video. Thank you so much for watching until the end. It means the world to me. And no matter what I've said in this video, I still love Log Horizon and more than likely always will. I love its hilarious characters, interesting storylines, and subversion of every isekai trope there is. And yes, it does have flaws, but you'd be hard pressed to find anything that didn't. I just really felt like some of these things needed to be said because people often talk mad shit about season 2 without reason that season 1 had just as many issues, but instead those were ignored for its more favorable aspects. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe season 2 is the dumpster fire that people make it out to be, but I truly don't believe so. I remember many of its arcs pretty favorably, and I just wanted to set everyone up for me going into season 2 with a very similar mindset as I did to season 1, which is to, yes, see the good in something, but also see the bad, and to show everyone that it's okay to criticize the things that you love. But that's it for me. So until next time, I've been That Isekai Guy, and go watch some anime.